You could spray your wires with cat urine. That would probably keep the bird off. But then all your wires would smell like cat urine.
Why do I always feel that when Chad does an announcement, it sounds like a Miranda being read to us?
Because after he makes his announcement, we all exercise our right to remain silent.
Very good comeback.
Reminds us that anything we say can be held against us later in the court of YouTube.
I think it's only fair that the panel liaison has to be heard on the chat before the show, too.
If you were going to create a lower third for Wile E. Coyote, what would his title be?
It would be some kind of a Latin derivative. What's that?
Super genius.
What is it? What is the subtitle when they introduced him of his species name?
Good question.
Well, the garbage trucks are here. So, Courtney, how long does it take him to get from Delaware to your house? About 4 or 5 days.
Depends whether they take the 405 or not.
And if they do take the 405, it will certainly be delayed.
Chris, how's your allergies?
Much better today. I did not have to take one of the pills that I've been taking.
You, Perry, and I all getting crushed by allergies.
Just sneeze too. Yeah, my allergies.
I'm actually, but again, I'm actually feeling much better today. Claritin D.
Yep.
You have to ask for it at the counter.
I didn't get the memo. We were supposed to wear our plaid shirts today.
Sorry.
Tis plaid day.
With the black shirt underneath.
Well, Alex didn't get the message. He got the black shirt.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media, digital media production of all kinds. Our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we are going to have Nick Jushchyshyn from Drexel University talking about how live broadcast cameras and lenses are tracked in real time. So it should be a very good second hour. So stay tuned for that. And let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we have?
Thank you, Alex. First in, Mike Edwards from Brooklyn, New York, asking, morning, everyone. Does the panel have any experience with the OWC Mercury Helios 3S in use with a Blackmagic Decklink card? Would you recommend it over Sonnet box enclosures? Thanks.
Go ahead, Jason.
I have a pair of them running Duo 2s, and I've never owned a Sonnet. They are rock solid. I don't love the way that the power supply connects. You need to kind of put a little loop in there just to make sure that nothing pulls out. It's not locking. Other than that, no complaints. Completely solid.
And so this is this holds a Mac Mini, or is it just or this is the card? This is the card with the drive.
Just holds the card. It's a tiny little box with the power. Yeah.
And is it a full sized? Will it handle a full size card?
Yes.
And what's the price?
I want to say less than a Sonnet, but I don't remember.
And 265?
Sorry, say it again, John.
I think it's 265, something like that. Yeah,
that's great. And the that's really interesting because what I've been looking at the most is the OWC. They have a hard drive solution as well, right? They have another one that you put the card in, and then the Mac Mini, I believe, right? So the whole thing fits into one. Or is it just the card and the drives? I guess just card and the drives and whatever you want to connect to it.
Oh, you're talking about the black enclosure, and that's a little bit of a different device,
but it's pretty cool. Yeah,
it's very cool.
Yeah. All right. Next question.
Jeffrey Reyes from the Bronx, New York. Which Wacom tablet do you guys use or recommend? I'm interested in getting a Wacom tablet for 3D modeling work. Also, are the pen displays more useful versus the pen tablets without the display?
So I've had a lot of Wacom tablets, and right now I'm using for what I do with this is a Wacom tablet here. For what I do here, this is the Wacom One. So this is the least expensive version. It's probably least expensive of a one with a screen in it. Now, I started using a tablet in 1993, so 30 years ago, and it was a little tablet that was, little tiny tablet that I had there, and I just couldn't not have one, and so I just constantly have had some version of that. I had a lot of the Intuos from Wacom as well after that. And I've had probably, 10 or 15 different Cintiqs, 21, 22, 24, 16s, and now the one. The one I use for this. If I was actually doing more work with this tablet than what I do with it, I'd probably get the Cintiq 16-inch. The 24-inch is a commitment, and probably more of a commitment than you want. So I wouldn't recommend the 22 or 24-inch now. I can't remember which one, what they call it now, but that bigger one is it takes up a lot of desk space. So you have to be really doing really fine detail. If you are, and you really need that kind of monitor space, then it makes sense. But it's not something that most people need. The 16 works really, really well. There are some people who are really fine with not looking at what they're doing, but it is so magical to sit there and draw and look at what you're working on. It just feels much more organic. Go ahead, Chris.
Alex, I'm curious, in your system, are you currently sitting at a computer with a single monitor, or does that tablet span multiple monitors?
No, the tablet is just a monitor, and the tablet, the way I use it right now, it's simply a program out from my ATEM. So that's what it's the program. It's a HDMI that's just full screen. That is just my ATEM. So it doesn't really belong to my computer in that sense of the way this one's built. And typically, it's not really a monitor, but it's whatever I put in it. So if I'm working on something, I'll put that window in. Oftentimes it's not the whole window. If I'm working in 3D, or if I'm working in a paint program, it'll be the window that is controlling that.
So you can't take your stylus and reach over to your main display and pull down menus. It's just stuff on that display that you can draw on.
That's right. I mean, maybe I could. I never tried to do that.
Well, I used to use a stylus back in the 90s as well, and I stopped when I started getting into multiple displays, because in order for it to be your writing to be the appropriate aspect ratio, you would have to squeeze the two displays on the one tablet surface. So think of like a quad split, but you only get to use the top two to draw on it, and the bottom two was where you put your palms. You know, I mean, you couldn't do anything with it. And then I'd have to buy like the biggest ones you could get back then, so that you had enough resolution to move your stylus between the two screens. And it just got to be silly when the displays got higher and higher resolution. And so I stopped using them.
Yeah, it's a pretty fast-moving market now. There's a lot of people. I mean, they're so common. If you walk into a high-end 3D / roto / you just see them everywhere. And they're, especially if you're doing a lot of work, if you can get used to the tablet. There's some people that just really like mice and trackpads, and I use a trackball when I'm not using the Wacom tablet because I don't have a lot of desk space available. I've got all this junk everywhere. And so a trackball keeps me from running into things with my mouse. So I think that, people use all these different tools. I will say that a very large percentage of them are using Cintiqs, to do their modeling work, to do their paint work. I mean, I very rarely do see I will say, I hesitate to say never, but almost never will you see a photo retoucher not using a Wacom tablet. Like, that is like they have to be using that tablet to do that. There's other less expensive Chinese versions of these that have lots of buttons and so on and so forth. I find that the fit and finish, as you would expect, is not as good as the Wacom tablet. I do applaud those tablets for coming out because they pressured Wacom to give us something that was less than $500. So the Wacom One is the $500 version. It's also more convenient. It's only got one connector. The connector is a lot simpler than the Cintiq. I have the Cintiq. And I may actually start putting it back in because we have so many keystrokes now with my little drawing program that having those keys back would be nice. This one doesn't have any keys on the side, which I didn't use that heavily before, but now I would probably use them more. Those keys on the side are pretty useful because you can assign them to anything you want it to do, so you can be doing things, and it makes it very efficient. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I found that the Wacom tablets price dropped precipitously the minute that iPads started to eat their lunch on the low end. I know it's not the same product, but yeah, I plus one also on getting the biggest one is really a commitment. It is just a pain in the butt.
Yeah, it's a lot of desk space. You have to really commit to it. And I have mine on a monitor stand, so it swings. So it's like one of those, where you'd swing in a monitor stand. It's really nice because I can just kind of pull it up to where I want to use it rather than having it sit somewhere. So the smaller one is easier. I don't know if I could do that with the big one, but I guess we have done it. We did it with the Monitors in Motion arm, which is their bigger arm. I think it was like the Cobra or something like that. That would handle this, and it was kind of great. It would swing in and just sit there, and you could draw on it. But I felt like there was just a little vibration in it that I didn't like. So anyway, this one's really stiff. The one that I have here is stiff, so I can draw on it, and it takes a little bit to move it, but it's great. So I think that I would highly recommend it. I'm not a big fan of the Intuos. I'm not a big fan of not having a screen. I think that at this point, the price point has gotten so low to have a screen. I would definitely recommend a screen. So before over just trying to look up and do it. But there's only a handful of people I've seen in the last 10 years that don't use something with a screen in it. Next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, asking, where is the safest and lowest cost place to park a phone number? A domain name?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I use Magic Jack. There is a thing called Numberborn where you can park one for about $2 a month. But I use Magic Jack because for $49 a year, you can transfer any number to it. And then you can plug in your Magic Jack to your Ethernet at home, and you get full phone service out of a RJ11 jack that's on the Magic Jack. Plus, it has an app, a Magic app, that runs on any cell phone. So it will ring your cell phone with that number, even though your cell phone has a different number, and it won't take up any of your minutes. So you can answer calls to that number still on the cell phone. So you can have two numbers on a single cell phone. That's why it's really handy.
You go, Jason.
I'd say Google Voice or Ubiquity for the former, and for the latter, Hover is my go-to for domains.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button, and then my screen filled up. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Is there a difference between parking it and not using it, and parking it and having it refer to another number or transfer to it? That would be my question. I do want to get rid of my landline. I'm very remiss in doing it. And the only people that ever call it are telemarketers, and I think they should pay for the phone number.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I actually don't know. Go ahead, Courtney. Do you know if you can just park it there? I guess you can just park it there and just leave it.
At Number Barn, you can just park it there. With Magic Jack, you transfer it there, and it does have call forwarding and free call waiting, call forwarding, all those things. So you can forward it then to another number once you park it there. You don't have to hook up you don't have to hook up the little appliance, and then it's like $50 a year to keep it going.
We used to own so many Magic Jacks. It was a kind of a funny little way before we really got working in comms. We were able to kind of have that be the dial-in from, because we had a lot of the little JK audio converters to make that actually work. And since we already had those, we had Magic Jacks to tie them back into the internet. Next question.
From Chris Fenwick here on the panel, and also from Emeryville, California. And Chris wants to know, I'd like to discuss the new internet provider I just had installed yesterday and get input from the panel.
Go ahead, John.
We were super impressed the speeds. Chris can articulate this more than me, but it looks like he's got fixed wireless setup into his apartment complex, which is super old and got old POTS infrastructure as far as cabling and old coax cables. So it looks like they're using DSLAM or VDSL into the each one of the units, but it seems to be working great.
Chris, what did you get?
So it's a Bay Area company. It's called Sail Internet. After getting their postcards for about 6 months, I finally succumbed. Well, the thing is, it's like in this building, it's so bad. By the way, I got the gig up and down. It's introductory price of $55. It'll go to $65 a month. No contract, no throttling, no data limit. And other thing that's interesting, it's not very widely available, obviously. So the service area is part of the Bay Area. So it's a local company. But I think the story behind it is you should always be looking. Don't be afraid to respond to some of the advertisements you get. It's a huge infrastructure lift for this complex, because what they had to do is they had to put, actually, maybe it's not a huge infrastructure. They had to put in multiple antennas on each of the 6 buildings in my apartment complex. And then, they're going to keep selling those postcards until they're cash positive on their infrastructure install. But the kid who installed it was really friendly. I think they have, and I realize this is a global show and this is a local solution, but there are viewers here in the Bay Area. They have some work to do on terms of like the fit and finish of the install. I told him, I said, dude, if you did this to my mother's house, you'd never be asked back again. He literally left cables. I go, I'll go get a dress kit. He just didn't have the right tools in his, or the right, he had the tools. He didn't have the right like hardware to like dress it in the wall better. But I'm getting up 60 down by almost 800 up. In the basement, when he tested it with his laptop, he was getting 930 by 930. And that's when they initially, again, after 3 or 4 postcards, I finally called and I said, okay, I know it says up to 1 gig, but 100 megabits up and down is up to 100 or a gigabit. So what can I realistically expect to see? And the numbers they quoted me is about what I'm getting.
It's funny. When I was in Missouri, I think it was Missouri, and I was talking to someone who had the Google Fiber, and I said, "Is it really a gig?" Like I was just, is it really a gig? And he goes, "No, it's only 930." It was 930 is when you get a gig. It's 930 is the
which is the number that they were getting in the basement.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a funny thing. Yeah,
So far, what I'm curious about, this is the first time I've actually used it on Zoom this morning. So I'm curious to see if anybody sees any,
it looks amazing.
No. Alex,
you feel almost like you're in 3D.
Awesome. That's what I was shooting for. Now, Alex, are you still primarily using a wireless hop from your house?
No. We had too many problems with it. It was expensive too. So it was expensive. We had it was the back. What happened was we couldn't get a very fast Comcast connection that would support the kids going to school during COVID. My wife running virtual events and me running virtual events. So I jumped on the wireless. The problem we really had was turkey vultures. So the turkey vultures would spread their wings out in the sun and split actually put their wing in front of the antenna, and I would have dropouts for a couple seconds, and I have to run. There was one time I ran out and like threw a little rock at the turkey vulture. I was like, "Get out of here! Like you're screwing up my internet." So anyway, so the turkey vultures is the reason I got rid of the wireless. And then we called Comcast, and Comcast gave us the same price, and then now has 1 gig down and 40 up, and now we have Frontier coming, and that's 5 gigs up and down, symmetrical for $150 a month. So
I happen to notice on their pricing plan under business plans, you could get, they say, again, up to speeds from 1 to 10 gig.
Yeah, it's getting pretty fast. Where you can get internet, the competition now is starting to cross the 1 gig turn, and so then the next thing you're looking for is symmetrical, and the prices are just going through the floor. So I think a lot of people were waiting to see what happened with 5G, and 5G turned out to be a disaster. So now everyone's investing in all the other things again. They're like, oh, okay, nothing's going to actually happen here. And Jason.
Yeah, anyone who knows anything about 5G is not at all surprised that 5G didn't actually do very much unless you're in a football stadium. What's neat about what Fenwick has, and although he may be in the San Francisco Bay Area, this is a kind of technology that's been around for a long time. It's repurposed DARPA technology. The one that I'm familiar with is Motorola Canopy technology, and it's extremely focused site-to-site, point-to-point, terrestrial wireless. The part that I'd never heard of before, but it makes total sense, is to, get a really fixed set, a cluster of antennas, and then use extremely short throw VDSL to use the POTS system in his apartment complex to just go right up. And then, when it's that short of a throw, you get almost no degradation. And the overhead, the 10% overhead that you're dealing with just simply has to do with the handshake.
And if anybody doesn't know, POTS stands for Plain Old Telephone System, POTS.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Do they have to? Was the pricing based on just you, or did the apartment complex foot the bill and split it amongst all the tenants, or what's the pricing like?
I don't know. I'm paying $65 a month or $55, and it'll go up to $65. No contract, by the way. And I believe, actually, I don't know. I think they gambled on it, and that's why they're sending the postcards out. But so they saw that this building was horribly served by Comcast. Horribly served. They were actively selling gigabit speeds, but they absolutely knew they couldn't deliver more than 200 down. But they would gladly take your money for gigabit.
Do you know if you're sharing bandwidth with anybody else in your apartment, since it's a single transceiver on the roof?
Here's what I know. The box because I hovered over, I was a pain in the butt. I hovered over his shoulder the whole time. What are you doing now? What are you doing now? Oh, here, let me get that for you. Antenna on the roof goes to a box that looks like a big switch that's bolted to the wall in a lockbox in the basement. Out of there, an Ethernet cable comes over into the AT&T box, which is completely insecure. Like, it's anti-secure. It doesn't even have a latch on the doors that hold it. I'm sure they blow in the wind. And then he breaks out of that Ethernet cable into the two, the green and the striped green POTS lines, goes into that, and then he connects up to the same green and striped green in the wall in my apartment, puts another little box. Out of that box, an Ethernet cable, who knows what that is, it is plugged into the wall, goes into my router. And I switched over from using the Night Gear, something that somebody recommended I bought, to using a single Google Puck, because the Night Gear wasn't working. Nighthawk wasn't working. He goes, here, try one of these. And so the Puck worked great. And that goes into a Netgear 16 output switch over here that all the computers and whatnot are plugged into.
And it sounds like he's what Jason says, a DSL DSLAM that puts it over the POTS line, and then you have a filter on your end to filter out the digital from your analog POTS line for telephone.
Yeah, and that same cable that goes into the Google Puck, if you just had a single computer, you could plug it straight into the computer, obviously.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, first I heard that a rumor that Comcast is training turkey vultures to block 5G service.
There's a whole plan there. They're breeding them. They're just throwing. I was going to go really dark there.
Exactly. So the other thing to keep in mind is that when you were negotiating away from Comcast, keep in mind that you're worth more to the internet service provider as a subscriber than you are the actual money that you're paying. They will bend over backwards. Everybody will, to keep you because they need that on their rolls. The number of people that are subscribers.
Well, I wrote a letter to their contact us after the install yesterday, and I said, look, I am super supportive of anybody who's competition with Comcast. And here's some things that you should improve on. You need to get better at this. Right. You need to have these things in your truck, and and I even said, let's make a testimonial video for all the other 1,000 apartments or whatever it is in this complex and say, hey, it's not hard to switch. You should switch.
Right. Next question.
All right. This one's from Douglas Carmichael asking, has anyone ever used a spectral audio editor like Steinberg SpectraLayers Pro? I've been starting to use it, and you can create some really creative effects when editing audio at the spectral level.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the important thing is that when you use a normal non-spectral layer, you're using a complex waveform, and you can't literally see all the individual sounds that make that waveform. Spectral will allow you to see individual and special sounds like a 60-cycle tone. You can literally see it and edit it and adjust it in a Steinberg or any other device that does some type of spectral. So it's much more precise, and you got to know what you're doing to be able to make it work for you.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you can think of it as kind of a visually oriented notch filter. So the frequencies are spread out in the spectrum and displayed visually. And so you can highlight or circle certain frequencies of a certain area and just suppress those frequencies in that area. I think Audacity has the ability to do this too. It displays it in a spectral display. I don't know if it lets you edit the spectrum.
Adobe's Audition has been doing it for a couple decades, so it's definitely been in there for a while. I mean, we used to use it for a lot of and I've used it there for restoration. You're grabbing something some blip or something, and you can. It's got some great what they call healing tools, which takes into account that you're not looking at the whole thing, and so kind of blends that back in more intelligently. It's magical. Yeah, I mean, using those, and I've never seen SpectraLayers Pro from Steinberg. I'm super interested, so maybe we'll get a second hour on that. I hadn't seen it until Douglas posted it here, so I'm definitely very interested. I saw my first spectral editor probably in the early '90s or mid '90s, and I just was, and I thought of all the things like what I have this thing like I could play a picture, like I could put a picture in there and. In just case you're wondering, if you play a picture, it sounds horrible. It just sounds like mostly like noise. It doesn't really work. But I was also thought that I could, get all the lyrics from songs if I took the cassette and put it into my Commodore and, just played it out, but didn't do that either. So anyway, it doesn't convert very well, but it is it looks really, really interesting. And we'll definitely see if we can get those guys on to talk about it because I think that there's a whole bunch of Steinberg tools that'd be cool to take a look at. They have a lot of really specialty products that you just don't see anywhere else. No, next question.
Next one in from James Fosleen in Minneapolis, Minnesota, asking, what other methods can you use to drop filler words like and besides AI tools like Descript?
Mitchell?
I'm a little old-fashioned. Used to use the old razor blade. But I've gotten to the point, particularly when...
Did you take out uhs and ums with a razor blade?
Yeah, with a digital screen. I just ripped my screen up. It's funny because I do a lot of voiceover work, and I can look at a waveform and I can tell when I'm doing those sounds. So visually, I can do it without even listening. Oh, that's me doing or whatever. So it depends on who you are and how you like to work, whatever your workflow is. But being able to see a waveform is definitely a plus over hacking away at a piece of tape?
I'm still working on the most manual way of doing it, which is trying to train myself to not say and It's hard, especially in a live show when you're coming up with things. It's very, very difficult to not use any of them. So I'm working on getting that done. That's the easiest place at the source, is to not do it, but it is hard to do, and I do it all the time. So I'm still working. It's a progress. It's a lifetime curve. I used to be really good when I was on radio. I never used those words. And then I got out of radio and slowly crept back into the mix. But I was imagining Mitchell, doing, like, when you said razor, I was thinking reel to reel. We used to, so like when we used to do reel to reel, you'd go to cut on a beat. You would go dunk, and then you go ooh, 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 and then you cut on the beat there. So that was our life. Go ahead, Chris.
Turns out silence is good. If you find most of the time we put those words in because we feel like we need to keep talking, and right. Silence can really draw people in from a performance standpoint. Mitchell, I totally agree. You get to a point where you can look at a waveform and I can tell. Mm-hmm. It's like in the Matrix. Did you see the woman in the red dress?
Yeah. Jason.
Yeah, best way to block a punch is to not be there. Practice is certainly the hardest part of this, but you need to remember, how do I put this? Because I almost said it's just one of these hard things.
See, this kind of question gets us all caught up, because now we're thinking so much about not saying we can't think out what we're going to say. So, there's RX tools out there that do it as well. So the isotrope RX tools will have these things that will run past these and run silencers on them. Gling is the new one that also does what Descript does. Gling is kind of you pay $5 a unit as opposed to the whole thing, but it seems like it's very similar to Descript. So those are the other ones that might do it. Next question.
Next question is from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Alex was quoting the Bard yesterday, so I asked Bard, who started Office Hours Global, and it said Nate DeMeo. Benefits: learn from experts, get good advice, make friends, stay up to date, be inspired. So, who is this Nate DeMeo? Is he, she, it here?
Go ahead, John.
I just asked Bard, and I worded it a little bit differently. I just said, who founded Office Hours Global, and it nailed it perfectly. And then I asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT says, I'm sorry, my training cut off September 2021. This is a huge advantage that Bard has over ChatGPT, is they've got integration into the web current information, which ChatGPT has a plugin for, but that has not been released yet.
That's interesting. Go ahead, Courtney.
And in answer to your question, Nat DeMeo is a podcaster in Los Angeles. He does a podcast, I think, called The Memory Palace, and was featured on This American Life and some other PBS shows. So that's who he is. But I've never heard him associated with Office Hours, so it could be a hallucination.
Next question.
Sorry about that. Darren Cirillo from Dallas, Texas, asking, are there any issues with storing your primary Mac photo library on a Synology network-attached storage?
Jason.
Darren, buddy, please don't do that. If you want to use the Synology app to take your photos out, there is an application that will do that. But trying to store the Photos app itself anywhere but on your main hard drive gets really hairy really fast.
It's funny because that's what I do.
Glad it works for you.
From Jason, I have an SSD that I have there. It's as an external. So the key is it's I copied it first. like I don't know what I'm going to do here, because when you move it, it wants to kind of rebuild it, and that's the thing that scares you. But once you move it over, it is, and then you have to assign it there, and there's a little bit of a setup. But once you do that, the problem I had was that my photo library was taking over my hard drive, and so I needed to put it somewhere else so that I didn't run out of hard drive space, because I take a lot of photos and a lot of movies, and just kept on getting bigger. So that's what I do there. But you can put it on an external drive. I would copy it somewhere else first and then move it over. But then you have to define it, and it needs to rebuild it on that drive. But it will do that. Next question.
From Andre Delay in Berlin. I'm searching for a bonding router solution to bond multiple LTE SIMs and a Starlink. Recommendations: entry level versus pro level.
Go ahead, Chris.
So, Andre, I realize you're in Berlin. In the U.S., our own Keenan Campbell has a disastergroup.us, which works really great. It does exactly what you're talking about. And they have a very attractive data plan. I'm just getting word from Keenan. His hardware would work if you put EU-based SIMs in it. You wouldn't get the benefit of his data plan. He's buying data in bulk and selling it to you at below wholesale rates. But his hardware at disastergroup.us would work. There may be a European solution that's better.
Go, Jason.
Yeah, +1 for Keenan and disastergroup.us. That hardware is unmatched. For those of us that were in Vegas in person, we got to see this right up close and personal, and it was truly impressive.
Yeah, it works really well. Bonding, you will have trouble bonding and then using something like Zoom, oftentimes because bonding in general has issues with the increased jitter. The jitter that happens because the bits are all coming at different speeds from all the different modems. So you will have, you may not find that works as well. So when you're streaming, it works extremely well. And again, you can take something like a disaster group and then plug a Starlink into it, and then you have a really fast connection with a lot of things that back it up. So if you're transferring files or you're streaming, the streaming works fine because there's buffers there. But when you're doing real-time WebRTC, we have found over the last decade that it just doesn't work very well in a bonding environment. So you have to be kind of careful of how you use it there. Things that are a little bit slower with SRT might work fine, but WebRTC itself is pretty sensitive to it. The one that we've used when we're not using something like, and we used at NAB, the disaster group .us connection, but we also use PepWave. PepWave is a way that we kind of build them from scratch, to make those services. So if you're if you don't have access to something like that and you're in Europe, you might want to look at a PepWave as a piece of hardware to bond them. I don't know of anything else that really does it, outside of services like what we were just talking about there. So. But just note that once you start bonding, you will have a hard time with things like WebRTC. Next question.
Alexander Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, has a question. Why is AFS, AFF autofocus single and autofocus flexible mode still a thing on mirrorless cameras with incredibly accurate continuous autofocus these days? Is there a reason for these modes to still be included?
Go, Jason.
Yeah, there absolutely is, because if you are accustomed, well, it depends on what you're shooting, right? If you're shooting fast action and want quick, adaptable focus, the classic, a horse, riding at you, then you're going to want a different focus mode. Also, if you want to show motion blur, it's going to be completely different. So yeah, it makes total sense to me that it's on mirrorless cameras.
And just a quick reminder that you can ask questions throughout the hour. So go ahead and throw those questions into Makana, and you can also vote on those questions and let us know which ones you want us to talk about next. So go ahead and do that now. You can also think about live tracking questions for Nick for the second hour, and we'll go on to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael is here. When I applied to a major broadcast truck company's apprentice program, I was rejected because of, quote, lack of experience, unquote, with mostly IT experience on my resume. The Fatima and ad aside, should we be recruiting IT professionals into our whole fold?
I think that in general, you want people with a lot of, in what we do, you want people that have more and more IT, and you'll see us continuing to focus on, bringing more folks that know a lot about IT. You'll see that on Fridays oftentimes. So we're definitely talking to folks like that. But when you work in a truck, the primary thing is going to be knowing the AV pipelines, that are required for that truck. A lot of people just start in production, their camera, their PAs, they're in production for a long time before they end up at a truck. Working in a truck it's like a submarine almost, and it's really complicated, and you're crammed in with a lot of people. So I think that they generally, they're always hungry to train people, but they do usually pull out of a group of people that have been doing production typically for 4 or 5 years before and then they roll cables for another 4 or 5 years in the truck, and then they end up getting to assist something. But a lot of times when you see someone cutting on a board, they've oftentimes been in a truck of some kind for 10 or 15 years. before you see them, go anywhere. It's a brutal existence. Like I have a lot of respect for folks that work in a truck because they really know what they're doing, and they're used to being under an incredible amount of pressure. And there's not usually, if the truck it shows up, there's not a lot of room for error. And so there's a lot of clients that paid a lot of money, and they're really upset if things don't work out. So the precision that people have to work out there is pretty high. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I did broadcast sports for a couple of years in the early 90s, and it's brutal. You have to be very comfortable with subjecting yourself to working in an environment that is like, I would call it subhuman. The best path to get there is, as it turns out, doing like Jumbotron. I don't know what they call it anymore. We still used to call it Jumbotron, doing the displays in stadiums. And at the college level, sometimes you can get in there easier working on the display. Besides learning just the environment of what doing a sports broadcast is about, there's a lot of crossover from there. So it turns out to be a good sort of apprentice program into the broadcast apprentice program. You have to show that you know your way around the gear, you know your way around the environment, but most importantly, can you work with people at that pressure level?
You go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree with Chris. In fact, it's the answer that I have is that make friends, become friendly with the people that work in trucks in general in your area, and you'll find you'll get a lot more work consistently because they know who you are.
And it's one of the reasons that we're doing more and more production. So we will be doing a Cinegear production. I think I've got that all sorted out now. And we also have a soccer game coming up that we're going to try covering. And one of the things that we're trying to do is how do we provide people with that experience without them having to work in a truck? And it's something I think about a lot is, Nick, who's coming on next. I mean, Nick started in Pixel Core as a database programmer, and, we had things that we were working on. Nick just sunk himself into it. Next thing you know, he was working on Benjamin Button, and so it's a matter of taking a lot of those examples and process and really digging into it. So we're going to keep on, but I think that even though it may seem like a simple thing, the people who do production for this show, they're getting used to working in a big team. They're getting used to comms. They're getting used to a global production pipeline. They're getting used to, and whether these are the exact tools they're going to use in the future is not as relevant as, getting the experience of working on these day in, day out. Really sets you up for the next generation of what we're working on. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Also, be careful what you wish for. You may get that job and decide you hate it. You have to be willing to let people yell at you for 3 or 4 hours at a time. Also, this is something that I learned somewhere along the way. Is I realized one time it was like New Year's Day, and I was going to I was working an NFL game at it was called Candlestick back then, and I realized that every time that you imagine a bunch of friends gathered together, watching a game, drinking a beer, eating chips, you're working. Every one of those times, you're working. So it's a rough life.
Yeah, I mean, I worked on an NFL game a couple of years ago, and what I was left with was this was really cool. It was amazing to do, and I could do it maybe 4 more times. Like before I was bored. like I was like, this is really cool, but it wouldn't take very long before I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. So it wouldn't have kept my attention.
It's a lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle, and people, if you really like to travel and you really like to be yelled at, it's a good lifestyle. I'm sure there's some people that work in trucks that take offense to that, but I have to say, when the Nuggets games, when I used to work for Prime Sports Network, it's gotten so much better. I've been in trucks and on comms with trucks in the last couple of years, and they're so much more calm. 30 years ago, it was one long expletive, like just one long, just screaming mess. And then at the end, they go, "Hey, everybody, great job. Let's go get a beer." It was just like, no one took it personally. And if you took it personally, it didn't last very long because it was just, wow. It was a thing. Next question.
Jack Ruppel from Breckenridge, Colorado, asking, could you use a Stream Deck or Stream Deck Plus with the Wacom to have the button control?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yes. I highly recommend Mix Effect Pro. It's certainly the way to go. It is a Swiss Army knife to control your ATEM if you're doing that with a Stream Deck.
I don't quite understand the question. Or a Stream Deck Plus with
what is
with
welcome?
The welcome?
Is welcome a proper noun? Is that a
with the welcome
thing?
to have?
Welcome shows up on one of the little buttons when you're using the base version.
Oh, okay. Next question.
Bobby Rafferty from Florida. Has anyone used Apple's Reality Composer? What did you make?
Go, John.
I have it loaded on my machine here, and I thought that we used this to bring the rocket in as an OBJ and then from there create a USDZ, but it's not letting me.
I think it's reality converter.
Yeah, that's what we used.
You need, the reality converter is the first piece of that puzzle. Yeah. And then what you do is you go from reality converter and then into composer. And in composer, you can put things together and work on textures and so on and so forth. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I was confused by the question. I thought that was the app that Steve Jobs used to create the reality distortion field, which he used in all of his presentations.
Yeah, this is the composer. Yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
Right when WWDC kind of started to promote this, I think I followed along with one of the lectures, and what I came up with was just a kind of a little play around app where, it would track a menu. And what I wanted was, when you put your phone camera like on the menu, the food would pop out, and it was really easy to code, and it was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, it's. I think it's going to get more and more important. We see new features added every year. Obviously, this year is going to be probably a pretty big year for the software, and I think we're going to spend more time on it probably on Tuesdays. We'll probably spend a lot more time talking about AR after we get through the Apple announcements, because we expect there to be a lot of them this in a couple weeks. So stay tuned for that. Let's go to the next question.
From Jack Rappel in Breckenridge, Colorado. Jack asks, as I understand, wind tunnel film is done with infrared. Can you discuss practical uses of infrared cameras today? How might they be used in AR and VR, such as anchoring text that has been infrared highlighted?
And I think it's infrared. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I don't know what wind tunnel the film is. I looked up and found something not suitable for work, but so don't research it in IMDb. Infrared, if that is what you're talking about, is used all the time. Most of the police helicopters in Los Angeles have FLIR cameras. That's what they refer to as FLIR, forward-looking infrared, that see heat signatures. So, and it superimposes it over a video image so that you can find people lost in the woods or criminals running away from the police helicopter highlighted. They look white because it shows up the heat signature as people are running around on the ground, so it lets them follow people a lot easier. It's also used in the construction industry for determining heat loss in HVAC situations, where they can see where all the heat is gathering in a room and where heat is being lost in a room. So they take a forward-looking infrared camera. There are attachments you can get for your iPhone to put a FLIR sensor over the camera or along with the camera and plug it into the USB Lightning port and give you a false color infrared image so that you can determine what's the hottest thing in the frame. It's great for spotting, troubleshooting circuit boards, because it'll show you what components are overheating. If something is overheating, it's a sign that it's going bad or shorted out or getting too much current. So you can spot components on a circuit board that are overheating to find the bad one.
Some people like to use it for photography. It's kind of otherworldly, so it has a very interesting look to it. While the phone uses infrared, our phone uses the phone uses partially that as an ID in addition to the LiDAR that's there. Everybody's face actually has a unique infrared signature, and if you have the right cameras, you can identify somebody from about 50 feet away, like with the infrared signature. And if you walk by some facilities 3 times without going in, they'll figure out who you are. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, there's a scene in the movie Heat, which I bring up because you mentioned it the other day, and I was watching it yesterday. And there's a scene where there's a police squad in a van looking at Robert De Niro as he comes out of this building, and it's all infrared. And there's a scene where he stands there and he stares at the truck, and he stares at the truck, and it's just so powerful because you can see this face and you can see the blood gathering around his eyes, and it was such a very interesting effect to use to make a very powerful comment.
Go, Jason.
Another great use for these is if you put them on drones, they can be used for power line inspection, for roof inspection, for any sort of
It can tell you how much water you need in your field from the drone.
Sure.
From those types of cameras. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Robin Cutshaw from Atlanta, Georgia, asking, I need more power for a UPS than APC 1500 provides. I've also had issues with APCs dying. What higher capacity stability UPS do you use?
I mean, most of what I use are APCs. The Libex are the next step up. The Libex are going to be a lot more expensive than the APCs, but they're really nice. They're going to condition the power a lot more effectively. So we use Libex in our bigger kits, as well as the truck that I used to have, or the trailer that I used to work and own. And so those are really really great transformer UPSs. But you can also, we just have lots of 1500s, but there are a lot of bigger versions of the APCs. We haven't had a lot of issues there. So anyway, go to Courtney.
Yeah, I just got a new one. It's down here below me, and I can't quite see. It's CyberPower. I don't know the model number, but I think it's 2500. It's a pretty good size, about the size of a small PC. And it backs up everything, and it gives you a nice readout of how many minutes you have left, and it reads the amount of current that it's using, and it does automatic switchover pretty seamlessly in its sine wave. So it's pretty good. CyberPower.
Next question.
And it's a question for me asking, where do panelists like to buy their shirts shown on office hours?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
It's an interesting. It's part technical, and it's a little bit fashion. But in my case, I go to the outlet shops at Polo because I can't spend $150 a shirt. But it works well, and it's easily distinguished from my background. So I go for solid colors.
Go, Jason.
At well over 6 feet and maybe 145 soaking wet, the number of places that I can get a shirt is like extremely limited, and Banana Republic just seems to fit right off the rack.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Eddie Bauer. It's hard for me. I can't even shop in a store anymore. It's like 2XL. Do you have 3XL?
Yes, that is a problem. Yeah, the COVID effect. Yeah, that hasn't worn off yet. Most of my stuff is Banana Republic. Most of my shirts are Banana Republic or Thai Bahama. So this one is a Banana Republic. Almost all the other ones you see are Thai Bahamas that I've had since sometime in the middle of COVID, and they all sit on a rack right there. So they don't leave the build. I don't want them to get, they were expensive. The time
have they ever been washed, Alex?
Yes, they have. They have.
Oh, okay.
They're dry cleaned. So they're, so it's not, So for the most part, the time Bahama ones are dry cleaned. This one can just be washed. And, I literally wear them when I'm on air, and then I go back to. You'll see me if you come in before the show. You'll see my standard state, which is usually some plaid shirt. Usually a plaid flannel is kind of my. I was talking to someone about this. About you always make decisions. They're like, well, you just wear what you wear, and I'm like, everybody makes a decision about what they wear. I said my resting state are ripstop shorts with a flannel. and some kind of t-shirt underneath it. And I've worn the same thing left to my own devices for about 40 years. like it's not like I haven't changed at all. And so if you leave me alone, that's immediately what I'll revert to. Just my comfort zone. And when grunge showed up, I felt like they just come and join my camp. So anyway, so that's that's pretty much what I wear. So if I wear anything other than that, I've made a decision that I should probably dress up to some degree from my resting state.
Any epic fails?
Of shirts?
Yes, sir.
I'm pretty conservative about my shirts. I don't wear a lot of crazy shirts. Yeah, I just gray, dark, cool colors. That's it. Next question.
Next question is from Jack Rappel in Breckenridge, Colorado. Does the panel have any suggestions for introducing a new concept or correcting prior falsehoods using Wikipedia?
Go, Jason.
Wikipedia is all about reputation, so don't think that you're going to create an account and make any edit that's going to change immediately. What you really should be doing is revising and correcting, and then be prepared to argue about any change that you make. And once you have a reputation, then chances are one of your edits will stick.
Yeah, the first thing you want to push anything into Wikipedia, it's oftentimes nowadays it's years of editing other things and adding other things to it and building up to exactly what Jason's talking about, building it up, or knowing somebody that is already connected inside of Wikipedia. And then another thing, if it's incorrect, you can try to reach the folks that are in the in the discussion or annotate it in the discussion and then you can hopefully persuade them to put the stuff back. I know with my Wikipedia page, it drives me crazy because it was really long for a while, and then it got short, and then it got long, and now it's short. It's always like moving around, and I don't know who is doing this. I go to Courtney.
Yeah, I found that people tend to moderate get very fierce in their moderation of certain Wikipedia pages. And if you put something in, it'll be there for a day, and then it's gone. And if you don't do multiple citations for whatever you're putting in there, put citations in the footnotes, all the stuff that shows up in the footnotes where you add something or remove something, you're going to have multiple citations, and it's going to have to be run by a bunch of other people who all can get in there and pull it out or stick new stuff in. That's different. So it's a long road to hoe, as Alex said.
Next question.
From Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California, Gordon asks, with ZoomIso pulling 8 1080p video streams into a Mac Mini and then sending the audio over Dante to the mixer, does that put stress on the network?
If you're sending the 1080p streams as an NDI stream, it would definitely put pressure on the network. If you're not, it will put some pressure on the network. Dante tends to just grab onto a big chunk of your bandwidth and want to hold on to it. So it will, but it won't put any undue pressure that you wouldn't normally have on a network, unless you have a lot of other things. But it does depend on how you're distributing those 1080p streams. So if you are, if those streams are going out as NDI, you will put a lot of pressure on your network. If they're not, then it won't be a problem. Next question.
From John Bourne Trader from, I'm not sure where, somewhere out there. Is anyone going to VeeCon this week?
I think this is Gary V's, Gary Vaynerchuk's conference, and I don't know anybody going. People were talking about it. He kind of spins it up, but I actually have never gone to it or known anybody that went to it. But he usually gets a lot of people to show up. Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas, asking, can Taskade replace Zoom for team meetings, collaborative on the same page with built-in video chat, screen sharing, and real-time syncing?
Go, John.
The answer is no. The amount of investment in infrastructure that Zoom and Team installs, you can't match that, and that's the reason why you're seeing these software switchers moved from their proprietary video platforms into Zoom as the backbone as a utility, and you just can't match that. I mean, we've been on for over 3 years now. We've had one day of a failure, so that's the important consideration.
Yeah, I haven't been able to take a look at it, but I would be surprised if anything. I mean, there's a time when all the railroads and all the oil companies and all the things were a bunch of little companies that all did their own thing. And then what happens in every industry is that kind of consolidates. And then you really have to have something that's different to stick out. I think that the video conferencing market has consolidated. And as a result, I just don't think that this is not a vertical I would go into unless I was a multi-billion-dollar company. And even then, chances of what's amazing is you look at, Zoom is, there's other big companies like Google and Teams or Google and Microsoft and Cisco, and none of them are close. I use them all every day, almost every day. Well, every week I'm in all of those platforms, and none of them are close to Zoom. So that's going to be so if you're a little company, I think that it would be difficult. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. I read that SoFi Stadium is an all-Dante facility, including boxes and other spaces within the stadium. When a house system takes a feed from a touring system, would you use AVIO connected to the touring console or use a direct Dante link?
You probably would not use it. I don't know. I don't know what they would do. I would avoid taking a Dante link at almost all costs. And the reason is for clocking. Clocking is an issue in Dante. Even in a facility that has all of these things, you can just get into all kinds of clocking errors. And so, you can, and we have done it. But the way we do it almost all the time is we have a stage box and we put another stage box next to it. We take analog feeds and we just feed them between the two. And that may seem like a crazy old-fashioned thing to do, but it really has solved so many. It saves us like days and days and days of stuff, is just to not try to do anything that's digital that might have some clocking error. We go, we want that jump to be really, often, again, it's two stage boxes oftentimes just sitting next to each other, and we just run them between the two and get what we need out of it. And it's worked better than connecting. If you have a highly technical team, and SoFi does, and on both sides, you might be able to merge that together. But you have to decide who's going to run the Dante network. Having two Dante networks, I've tried it, have not very successfully very often. Next question.
John Snyder, Reno, Nevada, asking, Apple's new accessibility features include the option to create a facsimile of your voice if you're at risk of losing it. It requires 15 minutes of training on random phrases. You suppose this is to prevent deepfakes, or is there a practical reason?
Go, Jason.
No, I think just like, who was the movie critic that lost his voice?
Roger Ebert.
Thank you. Just like Roger Ebert, I think there's a very practical and just staring you right in the face reason to digitize your voice.
And go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think they use that on Val Kilmer for his lines in the latest Top Gun movie, because he has lost his voice, unfortunately. So this company can do that, and it is for people that want to still speak in their own voice, who have had a laryngectomy, when they remove their larynx because of cancer or some other type of disease. So it's a great accessibility feature, I think, for offering that to people who see that coming.
Yeah, I feel like I would love to know what the version, if I was going to lose my voice and someone said you could do this in 15 minutes, I would ask, okay, what's the 20-hour version? Like what is the, because when Siri was trained, that the woman who did it, I mean, we've talked about it, she was doing it every week for a long time of different phrases and different things. And so I would want to know, if I thought I was going to lose my voice, I would definitely want to know, like, how can I map the entire everything I could possibly say accurately. So I think that's although with mine, anybody who's been on the panel could probably just pass the panel their own stuff into it, and it would figure it out for better or for worse.
I was just going to say, Alex, I apologize, I don't have the hand raise tool where I'm at, but there's like hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of your voice on office hours and Twit and all kinds of other things. So, there's resources available to train.
It's okay. Well, thanks, Nick. We'll be with Nick in just a second here. One last question for the first hour.
Paul Wallace from Austin, Texas. Rewind AI is a macOS app search engine that records everything you've seen, said, or heard and makes it searchable, and stores it highly compressed only on your local storage, not in the cloud. What will be the impact?
Go ahead, Jason.
We've been asked about this in the past on the panel, and the answer is, not much.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, the impact is that data will be subpoenaed by the court when they're investigating you for some crime you've committed.
Yeah, I think it's a horrible idea. All right. We are now jumping subjects and jumping into our second hour, and we're here with Nick Jushchyshyn from Drexel University, and we're going to talk about camera tracking and lens tracking. Nick, can you give us a little bit of an overview?
Yeah. So I'm here in the studio at Drexel University, and I guess you should be able to see down in our little super source here, kind of a studio view off to one side. This is Chelsea, by the way. Chelsea's going to help me out with some of the camera stuff. And behind the desk, Laura's going to show camera 4, where we have another little crew doing all of our switching and everything. So from furthest to closest to the camera, that's John, Nikki, and Laura. And just as a plug, all four of these students know this technology really, really well. And Chelsea is looking for a summer internship. And John and Nikki are looking for 6-month co-ops that would start in the fall. So if you need this kind of skill set, send me an email and I'll make sure to connect you there. But that's one thing to note is it takes this team of 4 to be able to run all of this equipment and so that I can be free just to explain it. So there's part of the overview. But if we can go ahead and switch back to, let's say, this overview view. So what we're talking about here is being able to track the position and lens of a camera in real time. When we work in feature films, the camera movement is analyzed after the fact in post-production. The imagery that camera captured is moving with what we call parallax, so that as the camera moves, objects that are closer to the camera are moving in the frame faster than objects further distant. And software can analyze that video after the fact and calculate how that camera moved. But if we're in a live broadcast setting, we need to calculate that instantly and feed that into our 3D systems. And so that's the kind of stuff we're going to talk about here. So I have kind of like 2 different versions of this to show. Laura, if you get camera 3, I think pointed at preset number 4, that should be good. And Nikki, we can bring up camera 4. There we go. So this is kind of like the cheap version of this. And what I have here is this is just a pocket cine camera. I have to add a little bit of light to it. And connected to the lens is something called a LOLED indie tracker. And so it is just a small rotary encoder. So I can actually just remove this from the camera here. So it's say that.
Who makes that?
The company that makes it is LOLED. So this is just a USB connectable rotary encoder. So this wheel here turns, it gets pressed up against the lens. And so as the focus or iris of the lens is moved, that is detected by this rotary. And then a USB connector can connect that into the computer, and whatever software is being used, such as Unreal Engine, can then know where is the lens set. So I'm just trying to position this back in, and there we go. Let me turn off my light. I'm trying to juggle too many things. But that way, what's really important is it's not just the position of the camera, but it is the lens settings. Because if the lens has more or less zoom, or the focus point of the lens is different, it affects the lens distortion, and we want to mimic the focus range in the virtual camera as well. And then in terms of tracking at this indie level, and that this tracker I think is in the $500 range. And then the lowest cost of point of entry for tracking the position of the camera would be to put a Vive tracker puck on here. So it's like a Vive controller, but it's just a disc. And you have a couple of these base stations. These are broadcasting a laser pattern that's in a synchronized grid, and the puck actually detects every time that laser crosses over its sensors. And that way the puck knows exactly where it is and how it's rotated relative to this tower. And we usually use 2 or 3 of these. And then that data, just like it would be used to track for virtual reality, can actually be fed into something like Unreal Engine to track the position, the rotation of the camera. You can do that with actually just a consumer Vive system, but you might run into, like, it's not designed to be full broadcast synchronization like Genlocked and all of that. But HTC does make something called a Mars system that's about $5,000, and that's just a dedicated tracking box that does have Genlock sync and is designed to use that.
Can you describe why Genlock makes a difference?
So Genlock sync, we can switch guys back to the, I guess, camera 4 or something like that. Yeah, that's fine. So Genlock sync is that there's multiple cameras in here, and there's a switcher, and there might be keyers and all of that kind of stuff. And each piece of equipment should be in perfect sync as to if it's a camera, it should be opening and closing its shutter exactly the same time across every single camera. And then every device and every computer processing that video should be operating at exactly, not just the same frame rate, but at exactly the same moment, and essentially processing the frame at the beginning of the frame and closing out the frame at exactly the same time. And so that's what Genlock is. It's basically a pulse. It doesn't give us time at all. It's just saying now, 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 now. And then that'll do that. You can have it set for 30 frames a second, 60 frames a second. I know Fox Sports Broadcast has actually Genlocked their studio at 240 frames a second. And that allows them to have multiple images on different screens for, to the benefit of different cameras. But anyway, that's what Genlock is. It's just synchronizing the frames of every device in your chain. And that's where, more expensive production gear comes into play, is the equipment that's designed to accept Genlock and to work with that kind of thing. So $5,000 is kind of the entry point for that tracking wise, because that brings us to the Vive Mars system, and that's actually used in streaming scenarios, and that's great. So, but the next thing is that, like, I've kind of got a just throw everything on it camera here. And
so you have a lot of versions. There's a couple different systems, right, on that?
Exactly. So on this camera, we have two things happening. One is that if we can go on camera 3, I think it's position 1. Let's change to position 3 on that. So in addition to the cameras that you're seeing, by the way, we have some PTZs. And so I'm just calling out locations for Laura to pick out on those cameras for the operation. So the first thing to see is this section here, and these are reflective markers. So each of these little balls has the same material on it that might be on the back of a jogging suit or running shoes, so that if you're jogging at night, headlights bounce directly back to the driver and they can see you. For us, we have motion capture cameras set up for this. I forget what position the motion capture camera was. Was that there? You picked it out. There we go. So all around the room, this is actually camera 12 out of 12 that are positioned all the way around this room. And you'll see that the camera lens has a ring around it. That's infrared LEDs. So that's firing LED light into the room. And then that LED light bounces off the reflectors in the camera and goes right back to that lens. Yeah, perfect. And then, John, if you can bring up Shogun. And Nikki, if we can switch that to our main camera. That's Unreal. So there we go, Shogun. All right. So the software that we have working that track the camera is this Shogun software. So this system is made by VeeCon. They make all the hardware, the cameras, as well as this software. John, are you able to zoom into the location of camera 1 for me? On the Shogun? Yeah, there you go. Just use the mouse wheel, I think, zooms in. Oh, Lara's got it. Cool. Chelsea, why don't you come over to this camera here? And so what you're seeing is the tracking results. So Chelsea, if you just grab the camera and move it back and forth, we'll see.
Are the triangles that we see there, are those the rigid bodies?
Yes. So hopefully that is tracking. I'm not sure if you can see it very well. Let's, how about tilt it down and up? Is that going to work easy? It's probably not. Hold on to that handle. Yep. There you go. There, now we're seeing it. Okay, so now move it up and down. So essentially, each little white dot is one of the markers in our system. And the cluster of markers, or the constellation of markers, are then interpreted by the software as, this is where the camera is. So Chelsea, if you pan like way off to the right, we might be losing the tracking, or we may be pushing the limits of our network in terms of that movement. But essentially, that will move around live with the movement of the camera.
And so I guess one of the advantages here, right, would be that you would, with a motion capture, if you're dealing with a motion capture camera inside of a motion capture environment with other motion capture actors, it's a way, it's kind of the Lord of the Rings kind of solve, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the key advantage of the the VeeCon system is that we're not limited to simply tracking a single camera. So with the, for the Vive Mars, for example, you'll need a separate puck for every single camera. For the VeeCon system, we get as many of these reflective balls as we can get. We can track that, more and more cameras, and we could even have someone wearing a suit performing a CG character like a robot or an alien or something like that. And all of that could be tracked by the VeeCon system all at once. And so that's the camera tracking in terms of position and rotation. And then on this camera, we have a few more tracking items. So
and what's the frame rate on the VeeCon?
The VeeCon system, we can dial that up to 600 frames a second. Yeah. If we wanted to. And that it doesn't really break a sweat at 300, 600. We actually just keep it a nice leisurely 120 usually. And so, and that helps us with interpreting motion blur and, being as accurate as possible we're shooting, our studio's set up at 30p. So we're doing 30 frames a second progressive. And so we're getting about 4 VeeCon tracking frames per video frame.
And that oversample also lets you filter and manage things, right? To make sure that, like, if you had 1 frame per, by having 4 frames for every frame that you have in video, you have some room for error, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So both the VeeCon system and downstream systems like Unreal Engine have filtering options to do, variations of weighted moving average and other algorithms to smooth out that data stream.
The only question I have there is, do you still use a Butterworth? Do you still use the Butterworth filter?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, that's Butterworth in Motion Builder in terms of character post-production. I learned that from you about 15 years ago. And that filter's used. And much to my delight, the Unreal Engine actually has the Butterworth filter built in as well. So when we're doing mocap cleanup or adjustment inside Unreal, like we have access to that filter right in the engine. So that's nice. So with this camera, instead of just the other camera I was showing was a prime lens, and so we were only tracking the focus. This lens is a iris, zoom, and focus, and it's 100% manual lens. And so we actually have 3 encoders. So this encoding system is from a company called Digital Camera Systems, DCS. I think their website's dcs.film. So this is a top of the line lens tracking system. And what we have here is 3 of those encoders. We have older wired versions. They actually have wireless versions at this point where you could put them on this is a fully manual lens. And Chelsea, if I can have you just adjust focus for a little bit, hopefully on this side, you'll be able to see a little bit of the encoder moving. We're zoomed in about as much as I can get it. So like move it a lot. Yeah, there we go. So you see the lens is moving, and that's because Chelsea's turning a focus knob with her hand, but then the rotary encoder is following that. And we have an encoder for focus, we have an encoder for zoom, and an encoder for iris. So all of that data is being captured. And then if we can do position 1, Laura, on this same camera. Yeah, there we go. So all of those are daisy chained into this box, which is part of the DCS system. And so this is a dedicated computer that's calculating that. The focus is a little fuzzy, but what we're actually able to see here is a display that is a readout of that manual lens. So we've pre-calibrated that lens. And so this lens has zoom from like 20 millimeters to 55 millimeters. And so if I were to move that zoom, there's an indicator adjusting in this display, telling me what my exact zoom setting is. And so I can read that out. This actually also has an inertial measurement unit, IMU. So it is also measuring the angle, the tilt of the camera. And so this is often used by DITs, the digital information tech on set, to basically capture fundamental camera information. And we also have the iris. And one of my favorite features about this readout is that it actually takes in the focus and your iris and will give you the mathematical bracket for what your depth of field is in terms of your focus. So you know, just by glancing at it, okay, I've got from 5 feet to 6 feet is my focus zone, and everything outside of that range is going to be bokeh blurred out. So that's the hardware side of it. John, if you could alt tab your way over to Unreal Engine, and Nikki, you can switch to Unreal on the main part of the Zoom. Yeah, so there we go. So we ingest all of that data into Unreal Engine. So I'm just going to hop over to the engine here. And right here, you're actually seeing the Unreal Engine response to the data that is going through, you're coming in from our camera generator. So if I were to switch to that camera, so now you can see this. So Chelsea, go ahead and adjust focus. And keep dialing and keep going that way, keep going that way, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. All right, that's good. All right, and now just move the camera left and right a little bit. Yep, there you go. So what you're seeing is the camera inside Unreal Engine that's responding to all of that motion. So what we have happening here is I'm just going to open a window called Live Link. And so under virtual production and Live Link, it may be difficult to read, but essentially we have an input from VeeCon, we have an input from the DCS system. I've got green lights for both of those. If, for example, I were to select this DCS, I can scroll down here to my telemetry, and somewhere in here, I should be able to see that. Let's click on here. All right, so Chelsea, your zoom setting right now is 32 millimeters. Go ahead and adjust your zoom. Yep, dial that zoom. There we go. Zoom in, and you can see in the background that Unreal Engine is responding to that, and then we've got the data coming in here. And so with the time I had this morning getting ready for today's broadcast, we didn't tie this into an Ultimat keyer, but normally what we would do then is have this Unreal Engine camera that you're seeing would be fed in as the background for an Ultimat keyer, and the foreground would be the green screen shot that the camera that Chelsea's been moving is actually seeing, with a green screen background. We can switch back to, there we go. So then the key would put, essentially me and this camera over an Unreal Engine background, and any movement or change in lens setting for the camera that is seeing me and the green screen would then be reflected in the Unreal Engine background live as well. And that's it. That's the overview.
Yeah, and so the and for if the panelists have specific questions, go ahead and raise your hand inside of the discussion. But a couple things there. When you're how many cameras have you set up in that studio? Okay, how many can you put together?
So we're set up for 3 at this point. We have 3
right.
Ultimat units, and we put each camera into its own Ultimat unit. And so what we normally do is we have the Ultimat 12 HD, which is a half rack mount unit, and it's about $800. That one is the one that we usually use for our Blackmagic Studio cameras. So we have 2 of those. So that's SDI out of the studio camera, SDI out of Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine's the background, the camera's the foreground. The key happens. The nice thing about those is Unreal can also generate a garbage mat around our green screen. So if we were to pan the camera above the green screen, Unreal would feed the Ultimat a garbage mat for that. And all of the trussing and everything above the green screen would be Unreal Engine scene, even though it's not green screen.
So Unreal Engine is not clipping it out in Unreal Engine. It's sending out a garbage mat back to the
Ultimat. Yeah, black and white garbage mat. So from Unreal, we can send both a garbage mat and a holdout mat. So if we were to have, say, a display screen, right, a video screen on set, and that video screen might show green. We don't know who's going to come in on that, or maybe the audio gauge is going to have green in it. So we can 3-dimensionally in the Unreal scene say, hey, this is where the video screen is, send holdout mat for this. And then the Ultimat will make sure that that screen is solid camera view, even if it has green in it. So that way it doesn't get transparent by accident. That's what the holdout mat is. And then the garbage mat is saying, all this area is garbage. It's the area that's outside of where the physical green screen is. It's to the left, it's to the right, it's above. And that needs to be transparent virtual set, even if it's not green. And so those two black and white masks can be generated and sent from Unreal as SDI signals into the Ultimate 12 HD. And so that the Ultimate 12 HD will respect those and incorporate those into the key. And
you're saying that, and as you're moving, what needs to be done there can be changing in real time. So what Unreal's sending out is not a holdout, but it's like that holdout could be tracked essentially right? If you're moving. So if you have a perfect 3D model of that screen, you can have a holdout map that keeps on being sent correctly to always hold that screen in place. Exactly. Yeah. So we could put VeeCon trackers on the television screen. Television screen can be on a cart, and we can move that around. VeeCon will tell Unreal where the screen is right now, and that holdout map will follow it three-dimensionally. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Nick, thanks. First of all, that's an excellent demonstration. How many people does it take to run that room right now? I mean, name the different positions and different software or hardware they're dealing with.
Sure. So right now, we've actually got two more folks arrived just in case. So we have backup, as Alex likes to operate at 40 to 60%. We're doing that. In this particular setup, and I've got, let's go ahead, Laura, back to showing the crew. And so John on the far end is operating the VeeCon system, and he's switching back and forth between showing Unreal Engine and VeeCon. So he's doing switching for the bottom panel that you're seeing in our super source. He's also monitoring the tracking, the VeeCon system itself. So then in between him and Lara is Nikki, and Nikki is running our ATEM. So he's running the super source. He's got an iPad running Mix Effect in front of him. And so he's just operating the constellation that's taking all of these video feeds in. And then Lara, closest to the camera, she is operating the PTZ cameras. So ahead of the show, she was here, like we were pre-programming some preset positions for the PTZs. And so she's operating the PTZ cameras. And then we have Chelsea. Hopefully you can see her in the top frame of our super source. She is operating on set on camera, so I don't have to do everything. So we would need generally one camera operator per camera. So, and at least 3 people at the console if we're doing this particular setup. I would say that normally we would have that kind of a crew going on. Normally the Ultimates are really good in, we're able to set them up before the show. We've got all the lighting on, everything's warmed up. And so we can double check our keys, and they usually don't need babysitting. That's the one thing that's why I love them, honestly, is like you just set them up and then they're good to go. So we don't usually need, unless we have backup. So we have Christine and Annie are also here. You haven't gotten to see them yet, but they're here in case somebody needs to jump in and take care of something else. So all of that for a show. And then, I'm your lack of talent on screen, and I don't have to do anything.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, if your virtual set has foreground objects that you want to pass the subject that's on the green screen stage in back of, how is that handled? Is it handled as a separate key layer? Does it generate a holdback mat? Do you have to build something in the set for that's going to appear in front of the people in the green screen that is a virtual prop, let's say, or a doorway?
Yeah, so that's basically on a case-by-case basis. So, one example would be if we wanted to have something that didn't exist in the real world, right? We want a virtual demonstration of a Saturn V rocket, right? So that rocket needs to appear, and someone needs to gesture to the capsule is up here, and the different stages are below. We might just drop a C stand in to stand for it and put a couple pieces of tape for, these are, basically guiding the person that's on camera to, like, hey, this is where the capsule is, that's the blue piece of tape, and the red piece of tape is where the stages separate. And so there's something for them to act against.
And that would be off screen. That'd be like on the other side of the camera, so they have a place to put it.
It could be physically in the spot that the thing's going to appear, as long as you were always going to keep the rocket there, right? But yeah, it could be off camera. Right. And, we can also do teleprompters. And, I'm looking at our camera one, and behind camera one is a really big screen that's showing me the Zoom meeting right now. So the person that's on screen on camera can see what the final output is. Right. Incidentally, that's one of the other cool things about the Blackmagic Studio cameras is they can take in a feed from the ultimate constellation result. And so the camera operator can actually see what their camera view looks like fully composited. So they could switch back and forth between their raw camera view, which is green screen, but they could also view the resulting key. And that's on a per camera basis.
Yeah, one of the things that we found really useful, we started doing this kind of camera tracking maybe almost 20 years ago, I think. But it was with all CG. So it wasn't keying anything. It wasn't tracking the cameras. It was just using digital cameras. And being able to do that on set and have the handhelds and figure out where you're going to put the shots and have the actor, a demo actor. So, I mean, right now we're compositing those in, but being able to do it in a completely CG shot in Unreal is pretty useful for previs, right?
Yeah, and actually, especially for previs. One thing to know is Epic has an iOS app, so you can get that for your phone or iPad, and it's called Virtual Camera. And it's a free download. And essentially, it gives your phone a live link connection over the network, so it could be Wi-Fi or Ethernet, to Unreal Engine. And so the telemetry, your camera in your phone is able to use its IMU and cameras for tracking itself. And so just like the VeeCon system is feeding our cameras in Unreal right now, you could use your iOS device just to experiment with it. Or, one of the things that we have done is gone out with an iPad Pro with LiDAR, scanned a location with the iPad Pro, take that model, export it as FBX or USD, bring it into Unreal Engine at scale. And now you can use that same iPad or phone as a digital virtual scouting tool. So we could figure out where do we go when we get that angle, that looks good, and we can zoom in, zoom out. What lens would we need for that to look proper? And does it actually fit there? Is there a piece of furniture there? Is there a wall divider? And so all of that can be done with a quick advanced visit, and then you could, use weeks or months to have that location in your computer, and you can do that completely free. So Unreal Engine's free, the iOS app is free. I think all of these features do actually work on both Mac and PC, and so that stuff is completely doable. Maybe a future Tuesday.
Yeah. I think that'd be great. To kind of put that stuff together. Got a couple questions rolling in. Let's go ahead to the first question.
First one in from James Fosline in Minneapolis, Minnesota. James wants to know, are your students doing something like a weekly production using these tools to get all this down?
Yeah, so I'm actually in the process of running a class called Live Event Virtual Production. And so that meets once a week on Thursdays. And we're building up to running a live webinar event. So thank you for asking that question. So on June 1st, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, we're going to run a full virtual production with all of this equipment, with the green screens, the compositing running. That crew is about 20 students. And they all started here about 6 weeks ago with no knowledge of any of this stuff. And we've been ramping them up over the last 6 weeks. Alex graciously visited the class last week and basically shared every horror story imaginable about what could happen. And
imaginable, that's all you need.
Yeah, it was amazing because Alex explained all that goes into preparing for a live event with all of his productions. And immediately after he disconnected, all of the students came rushing up to me like, okay, I need to get my prep stuff done. Like everyone wanted to know, how do I get ready for this event that's 3 weeks away? So it was the first time I've ever had students coming in asking me to work on stuff 3 weeks in advance. So that was awesome. So anyway, I think in the office hours email, it's probably showing up as a partner event or collaborator event. Alex is going to be involved in that event, but for that, over the 6 weeks that have led up to now, the students have been building out a fully custom virtual set in Unreal, and then every one of those 20 students has a job in the live event, whether it's operating cameras, operating switchers, handling audio, handling lower thirds and data. There's data systems. We kind of cobbled together, actually it was Nikki kind of cobbled together our own mini Mukana, so that we're able to take in questions and bring them into lower thirds. So this class is teaching all of these techniques to those students. And when they finish up in June 1st is it, like at the end of that event, it's just, I think we're planning a barbecue or something like that for the week after that.
Next question.
Another one for Nick and his crew from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Roscoe wants to know, has the availability of lower-cost camera tracking systems caused a growth in the mocap, or are you missing technical skills still hindering growth? What industries are growing the fastest, and where do you students want to work?
Oh, okay. So the industry that's growing the fastest is internet live streaming, and because it is much more accessible. I mean, really, most of what we're doing, even just running a camera and broadcasting it, used to be exclusive to major broadcast networks and at the very best a local television station. So the availability of the cameras is huge. For us, we've grown out of a department that we've been teaching feature film visual effects for 25 years at this point. So we've had a motion capture system here for at least 15 of those years. And it's just that the interconnectivity, it's the real-time graphics. So 15 years ago, when Alex and I, when Alex was first introducing motion capture to me, the fidelity of the graphics you could do with it was at basically GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64. That was kind of the upper echelon of graphics capabilities at that time, particularly with real time. But today, with things like Unreal Engine, we can generate almost near photorealistic imagery at comfortably 60 frames a second. And so that software is completely free. So students, professionals can download that, get up to speed and learn it and put it to use. So that software availability and capability is huge. Having cameras that we can get for less than a couple $1,000s a piece that are connected into these constellations. Again, a Constellation 2ME, at the HD level, it's like a couple $1,000s, and it's actually a little less than that. So price wise, if you're doing a corporate event, if I am doing an educational event, we're bringing this stuff in so that our students are brought up to speed, so that they're ready to find those jobs in the industry, and they already have familiarity with it, so that they know what SDI is, and they know how to route all of these things, and they know how to handle video and PTZ, and just know how critical a live broadcast is, and all the prep work that goes into that. So I don't know. I know you guys are looking for, some of you are looking for positions and internships. Chelsea's a game design major, so the Unreal Engine side of things tends to be interesting to her. Another thing that she specializes in is the LiDAR scanning and photogrammetry, capturing the real world and getting it into the virtual. Nikki has actually been working in live event streaming now for a couple of years for a esports broadcasting company called eFuse, right? And so, it's kind of like an office hours, except for video game sports. And John is also been working on this virtual production space. Laura's been working a lot in motion capture specifically, and in Unreal Engine creation. And so the nice thing about this platform of skills is they're applicable in a lot of industries. It could be a game design company that either has motion capture or building out scenes and characters in Unreal Engine. It could be an animation or visual effects television show or movie like Mandalorian. We have alumni that are at ILM, working on those kind of productions. So it could be, live broadcasts for a show or episodic, or it could be corporate events and live streaming events and sales things and all that sort of thing. So yeah, I think right now they're ready to jump in wherever they can be put to use.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that 15 years ago we got our first mocap system, which is a little USB based motion capture system. We paid it off in one, the OptiTrack, and paid it off in one job. Like the very first job that came in was just doing corporate animation. It was like little examples of how to use a product or a way to visualize someone using the product, and we just in one day we just captured all the footage that was necessary, and then we and then after that we got another bigger, much larger job that definitely paid it down. And so it's just a matter of knowing where you're going to get the work to come in. It was a lot of fun. Let's go to the next question.
Steve Martin from Orlando, Florida asked, we've had pretty good success with the Bliss tracker. How is the approach you're using with the mocap cameras different? Better?
Have you used the Bliss?
Bliss, I'm not actually even familiar with. So hopefully there's a little bit of a follow-up on that. I don't know how the Bliss system works itself, but one type of tracker that I did not cover, I just don't have one here, is a dedicated camera tracking system. Two companies that come to mind are Mosys and Stype, S-T-Y-P-E. Mosys is M-O-S-Y-S. And what they do is they basically flip the mocap system inside out. So where we have motion capture cameras all around our stage, instead the motion capture camera is mounted one camera to the anim cam, the camera, show camera. And that motion capture camera can be pointed either up at the ceiling or down at the floor, and the reflective markers go there. So the reflective markers might be called a star constellation. In a broadcast studio setting, you usually put them on the ceiling. And so the one mocap camera sees them as reflections and as a star constellation. In an NFL or NBA kind of scenario where a camera might be getting set up in a venue and then taken down and put away or taken somewhere else, a lot of times they'll put the reflectors on a piece of like dance marley that just rolling out piece of rubber, put all the markers there, have the mocap camera pointed downward. So now the star constellation is on the floor, and that allows the movement and position of the camera to be tracked. And so I don't know if that's what the Bliss system is, but I thought I'd mention at least there's others.
Yeah, my understanding is the Bliss is using something similar to, what the kind of the real sense type thing. So it's I think it's an infrared, it's kind of building out it's stereo infrared, I believe. And then it's, grabbing that data, much like what we saw with the old Microsoft.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, yeah. And those have been fairly, much more effective than I expected them to be as far as being able to grab it. It's probably not quite the same resolution as what you're seeing in the studio here today, but it definitely, I've seen a lot of people produce some pretty interesting things. Here's where the tracking really matters, is when you're touching things. So when you see people's feet, when you see that, and you can work around a lot of things. So if you're using a lower cost version of this, oftentimes you just don't show people's feet, or you don't show people touching the things that they need to touch. It's the contact where that's what I find. Nick, you can let me know if you agree, but that's where people are contacting a CG object in the scene is where you notice any issues that you might have with tracking.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And so the nice thing is that the set of mathematics are really mature now. And so built into Unreal Engine is a lens distortion calculation. So that basically you tell it, I've got a checkerboard. This is how many squares there are, how many centimeters each square is. And there's a process in Unreal where you're taking the SDI feed from your camera, you're moving the checkerboard around, and the system in Unreal analyzes that and calculates precisely what the lens distortion is at that focus, zoom, and iris setting. So it's a pretty involved process to do that for a range of, like, your entire range of focus, your entire range of zoom, and your entire range of iris. It'll calculate independent lens distortion values across that entire set of ranges, and then blend between those as the data comes in. And then on top of that, once that calibration is done, there's something called an Aruco marker. It looks kind of like a, what are those QR codes? It kind of looks like a QR code, a little bit simpler, but Aruco is what it's called. And so you can literally take the image of an Aruco marker. It's essentially a barcode that is unique to, like, this pattern of squares is marker number 3 of this size. And you can take that image into Unreal Engine, and you can lay it on the floor in Unreal Engine in the virtual studio, and take the physical copy of that Aruco, lay it on your floor in your studio, and say, that's the floor. And then Unreal will reel in the camera tracking value to that with the lens distortion. And from there, all of the camera movement that's coming in from VeeCon is considered relative to that starting point. And so that's how you can get the floor contact and have it locked in really nice. Usually we try to stick into one area. Like, the further away you get from that calibration point, the more possibility of error there is. But
can you use more than one marker?
You can, yeah. And you can use different markers for different cameras, right? So each camera could be calibrated independently. Each is going to have their own set of lens values. And so all of that can be worked together. It's like any live event. There's a lot of pre-production work, but then once it's all calibrated, it just goes.
Well, it's funny, when I started at ILM, they were tracking cameras by hand. Like, it was literally like a shot, and you get the camera report, and the camera report was written on paper, and it was not always accurate. In fact, it was almost never accurate. It was almost never the right lens. You look at it, and it would say 50 millimeter, and you're like, that is not a 50 millimeter lens. Like, you got good at knowing what lens it was, and then you put a cube in, and you get the camera to where you thought it would look right, and then you start tracking the positions and try to have the cube not slide, or you tried to get a model and put it underneath something and try to get it not slide. And then we were excited about the fact that we were able to just push a button, and for whether it's RealViz or other Buju or many of the other trackers, you hit the button and it would just track it all. It would just grab a bunch of points and track them all. And Nick was all in the middle of all of that. But now it's kind of an amazing thing that we can do it all in real time and key someone in. It's come a long way.
But all of those same principles apply. I mean, that effort that went into hand calculating all of that for films is built into the software, and it's still a process. You still manually have to build out that lens table, and it takes a little bit of time. But then once you have it, it's really nice.
Next question.
John Foltz from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, asks, Nick, what's the black floor in your studio?
Oh, John, if you can switch on the little ATEM on the desk to input number 4. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so there's our, this is the whole studio. And so the flooring that we have here is actually gymnastics floor routine material. So I think we got this from Rubber Floors or so. I forget what the name of the company is, but it's just the same exact material that would be blue for an Olympics gymnastics event. And it rolls up super easy, right? So our green screen cyclorama that's behind me, it's green floor under me where I'm at right now. And this rollout floor, it's about 3 inches, 2 to 3 inches thick of nice soft foam, and it's carpet. It's a layer of carpet on top, and it's carpet that we can put Velcro into. So when, if we want to mark, someone's position where they need to walk to and where the origin is, we just put a piece of Velcro down. There's like entire lines of products for nursery schools for doing that. And for the mocap, it's really easy on the physical performers because, they've got a really nice soft carpet to work on, a lot of, if they're dancing or leaping or whatever. But at the same time, as long as that's down, it's protecting our green screen floor as well. So that we're using a material called GAM floor, GAM floor, which is basically vinyl, sticky vinyl. And it comes in rolls that are like 3 feet wide or something like that. And so we just stick that onto the floor, and that's our green floor. And so if we need to, we could peel it up, or we could just put down another layer if it gets all scuffed up. But the first layer of that we put down actually lasted a good solid 10 years by protecting it this way. And so we just recently put down a new layer, mainly because we've got a whole slew of compositing classes running right now, along with the live event coming up. So, John, you can go. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
The one question is, when you picked the floor, did you look at it through the VeeCon cameras, the infrared?
No, but I did deliberately choose dark charcoal gray.
Well, the funny thing is that we found that so when we picked the flooring that we used for our mocap studio, we actually bought one of a lot of different floorings and one of all the curtains, and we looked at them through our OptiTrack system. But we looked at it through the infrared, because what we found was they were all black, but some of them literally looked white. To the camera, they were polyester, for instance, looks white, in infrared, and so we used it to pick out our curtains.
Yeah,
nothing like so someone asked early in the first hour, how can you use infrared? You can use it to pick out your curtains.
I definitely gambled. I did not test this, but John, if you go back to the ATEM number 5, it's number 5 is from the Constellation, and then on multi-view, let's go to John's view of Shogun. And John, in Shogun, do you know Shogun, John? How about you switch with Christine? Christine is one of our mocap experts here. And Christine, switch the view to camera view. It's in the, yeah, you got it. There we go. So what you're seeing here is what our VeeCon cameras see. So we actually have 16 cameras total. We only have 12 of them set up. We usually have 4 on the ground as well, but we didn't set them up for that. And you can see a list of them to the left. And there may be some blue specks in there, but double click on camera 2. Okay, so ideally in camera 2, are you able to see the dots that are moving for the camera?
Yeah, we can see them.
So that's all that sees. And we're not getting any signal off of the floor. And even with cameras directly opposite of camera 2, shining their infrared light, which would be bouncing up to camera 2. So it worked out like this particular floor, charcoal gray, I think it's rubberflooring.com. Their gymnastics floor is working great for us. And while we're in VeeCon, go back to the 3D, 3D view. Select all the cameras and activate rays. You've got the camera selected, and it's under the filter menu to the right of the, and activate rays. And there we go. Zoom out on your view. I think is it left mouse, right? Yeah, there you go. So now as I'm moving this camera, you can actually see which cameras in the studio have a line of sight on the camera, and they're kind of like laser tracking it. And so that's how that system works, and that's how we see all that. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Courtney,
we can go back.
I was wondering, Nick, if that soft floor gives you a problem because you move up and down about an inch or so as you sink into the foam. Does it look weird?
To a degree, yeah. Depends on. Like for a hefty performer like myself, I sink down a little bit lower than some of our lighter performers.
So as long as we don't see your feet, it's really not a problem. And registering the floor in your feet.
Yep. So we're calibrating for the level of the carpet. And the one thing is that when we're running green screen studio is the carpet's not down. So we roll all of that up. And the nice thing is that this carpet is 4 individual pieces that each roll up very quickly. So like one person can get all 4 of them rolled up and off to the side in about 10 minutes. And when we have a class of students, it takes just a couple minutes to get them all up and out of the way. So generally, when we're doing camera tracking, the carpet's not down. And when folks are walking on floor that would be green screen and in view of camera, they're walking on a concrete floor with the green on it.
But the good news is that it's a great example of general relativity. All right, next question.
Next question from John Snyder, Reno, Nevada, asking, what are some unusual ways to use live camera tracking?
Ooh, okay. Well, I don't know that it's unusual per se, but I think one of my favorite things is to do the virtual camera tracking and do a virtual site scouting, so that you can use this approach for visiting a site that you don't have ready access to all the time. You can basically go to the site, capture it using your iPad LiDAR and photogrammetry, have a 3D virtual model of that site, and now you can spend as much time there as you like, and move your virtual camera anywhere you like, and really experiment and get an understanding of, well, this is where we can put track, and this is where we can put a tripod, and even where we can put the folding tables and where the cables will run and things like that. So that's one application that I don't think people think about immediately. Another thing that we can do with this is we can track props. So if we had a character, for example, who's exploring a cave, and they're on green screen and we're live tracking them in camera, this is a live event and all, they could be holding like one of those, big lantern flashlights, right? And we could be tracking that flashlight, so that as they explore the cave and they move that flashlight, the beam of light from that can be projected in the virtual space from the position of that flashlight, so that as they turn that flashlight, the beam of light goes across the wall of the cave. So that stuff is fun. And, there's all sorts of things that you can do with it, including, you could create interactive, experiences. So you can use it for seeing, for example, sharing a virtual reality experience, right? So if you have a person in VR, they can see three-dimensionally everywhere they are, but nobody outside of that headset can see where they are. These tracked cameras can bring an audience into that VR experience. The green screen can key the person that's wearing the VR headset, and knowing where the camera is in the 3D scene, we can follow them along and watch and spectate that. So there's a few.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, we used it a lot on Poseidon Adventure, the Wolfgang Peterson version, to do set extensions on the set. So through video assist, for example, there's a live, you're shooting, it's not a live show, they're shooting on film, obviously. But when the camera tilts up, the whole top of the set doesn't really exist. It'll be put in graphics and post-production and CGI. But it does give the camera operator, if the director says, I want to start on the second balcony, which will be CGI later, and come down to the foreground and end up on the two characters and on the floor in the foreground, they can, we would track the camera and lay in that virtual set extension, so the cameraman would know where to point the camera and how to make the move and where to end up in the right place. So that worked pretty well, although the amount of setup time it took in doing it in a real motion picture set took up a little too much time, so they eventually axed it. But except for a couple of very special shots that the timing had to be perfect. But it's good for video assist in that situation where it's not used live, so that they can figure out where the camera's going to pan to and what's going to be over in the left or up above, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. On YouTube, there's a nice little behind the scenes look at how the BBC used virtual production for their Olympic broadcast. So I think if you search BBC Olympics virtual studio or something like that, you can see some things. And they did a lot of that. Now, they were on a green screen set as well, instead of a physical set. But the same tool that allows us to track the camera if it pans away from the green screen and have Unreal generate a garbage mat and do that virtual extension, you can do that with a physical set as well. And you'll see a lot of esports productions will do that, and they'll design their set so that there may be some kind of vertical beam that's physical. And that's essentially the seam between the physical set and the virtual set that might be above it. And so the camera can pan away and look into a virtual space. And the opposite is also possible. So we could take a locked off camera of a camera on a tripod, not moving, have the talent in front of that camera standing standing in one place talking, and that can be composited into the virtual set. And then you could do big camera moves with the virtual camera in the Unreal Engine space, where the ending position of that move is really where the physical camera is. But as long as you pull backward, you're not losing resolution, right? As long as essentially imagine the camera that's filming the talent as being a projector. It's projecting that talent into the set. And as long as you're making that talent smaller and smaller in the field of view in the virtual camera, you're not losing any resolution. And as the other trick to it is you really want to keep that moving virtual camera relatively in front of, left to right, maybe no more than 10 degrees offset from the position that the physical camera's in, so that you don't start to get that cardboard cutout look if you go around too far to the side. So those are other little creative ways of using this.
Next question.
Mark Giuliani from Washington, D.C. wants to know, can an Unreal Engine model feed multiple cameras simultaneously, or do you need a separate computer running Unreal Engine for each camera?
So depending on how critical and expensive and live your event is, you always want redundancies in lots of things, right? So something like, if I forget the number, does anyone remember the Fox Sports, how many Unreal Engines they're running? Is it like 24 or something? 12, so it's 12. So for an NFL broadcast at Fox Sports, they're using at least 12 Unreal Engine boxes. And probably half of those are backup. But yeah, with a Decklink Duo, or I think we just got a Decklink 8K that actually has 8 HD inputs. So Unreal Engine can address each of those individually. And as long as your graphics card can keep up with generating the video for all of those outputs, a single Unreal Engine can generate, as many SDI outputs as you can fit SDI cards in your computer. And again, there are Blackmagic Decklink Duo that has 4 input outputs, and I forget, it's the 8K Pro maybe that has 8.
I think it's the quad.
The quad 8. Yeah, something like that. I mean, I have one. It's in a box over there.
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
It's not within reach. Sorry, I failed. Yeah. I failed my office hours test.
No, it's all good. Yeah, and I mean, I would tend to always have a computer for every one of them, mostly so that you can put as much detail as you want and as much into every one of those. What happens is, as you start to, we've done ones where we've had 4 outputs from the same computer, but you start having to keep your frame rate going and everything else. Now, we had to start making choices, and that was kind of a hard thing. Next question.
Next one in from Steve Martin in Orlando, Florida. Any suggestions for Genlock setup with Blackmagic Ursa broadcast cameras with ATEM?
What are you using?
You can just use there's a Genlock generator from Blackmagic. It's one of their microconverters. That's a possibility. I'm using, I think I'm trying to remember it's called an UltraSync 1, and I forget the company that makes it, but it's a little wireless unit, which, I think us OGs that have been like, wireless, you can't Genlock wireless. Apparently you can Genlock wireless these days. They're a couple $100 each, and they can also wirelessly transmit time code as well. And so we've used those as well. And we have, like, our main clock is an ambient slate that can generate time code. And then we generally use one of the, I think it's Atomos is the company that makes these UltraSync ones. I could be wrong on that. But you use one of these as a master. And the nice thing about it being wireless is you can just mount it to the camera, and it's just one less cable that you need to run to your camera stations. But again, very inexpensive. There's a Genlock generator from Blackmagic that's like just one of their microconverters, and it's got, like, I don't know, more than half a dozen outputs on it. And so that can go into your ref inputs for your hyperdecks and for your constellations, your ATEMs, and your cameras. The one thing just to know is that the ATEM mini line does not Genlock. So there's no Genlock input for the ATEM minis. So you'll need either the studio or constellation models to use Genlock.
Next question.
Actually, I have a question. I know you have the big investment of green screen behind you. What's your preferred green screen paint?
I'm going to defer to Alex on that one. Whatever Alex says, that's what the best one is.
We use digital. We use composite components. Digital green is the paint that we use, and that's all we use.
Roscoe is no longer the preferred choice.
It's got too much blue in it. So the Roscoe is a little bit darker and a little bit bluer than the digital green. It's a different of opinion, but I've used both a lot, and I strongly prefer the digital green.
Annie, if you can, okay, go ahead. I was just going to note one thing is that the reason I defer to Alex on that is our green screen paint pretty much came from Sherwin-Williams, and we just took a piece of that green GAM floor to the store and said, match this the best they could. And so, because we couldn't change the color of the vinyl that we were putting down. Right. So we tried to have the paint match that as close as possible. And it works. We're using Kino's 4-foot Kino lights, and they all have green bulbs in them. So really the green screen is only getting green light. It could be gray, and it would be green.
Yeah, once you start doing green on green, you can get away with a lot more. Next question.
Lenny Nelson, San Antonio, Texas. Have you ever used a video wall as the virtual set so you don't have to key the talent?
Yeah, absolutely. If we can go back to the super source, and Laura, can you use the joystick to move your camera 3 to show our video wall? So over here, that's perfect. Thank you. So this gray wall that you see here is our video wall. So it's 12 feet wide and 10 feet high. And this is actually a retired U.S. Army rear projection rules of engagement training simulator. And back about 20 years ago, they donated it to college because it wasn't of use to them anymore. They had other ways of practicing, or maybe they just didn't need practice. They just did practical. But we use a pair for this. We use a pair of laser projectors. Each laser projector is 5,000 lumens, and we use software called Scalable Display Desktop that basically pixel for pixel lines them up. We use a camera, and so then they perfectly overlap. And with that setup, we can actually get white spots on the screen that are brighter than our LED studio lights. So we actually have to kind of tone down the brightness of the Unreal Engine scenes. And so this is set up to be gen locked from our Unreal Engine scene. And then, the tracked camera faces the talent. The talent is on camera. We're lighting them practically. And then the video goes onto that screen. And we get all the parallax of all the movement because it's all live updating. So it's not like South by South,
Yeah, and we've used LED walls as well.
Thanks.
The big thing you get into is if you use an LED wall as opposed to projection, you get a lot of brightness that's available there. But moire and a lot of other compression artifacts become more challenging. A lot of times we're trying to get under 1.2 mil. You can't curve that. So the ones you see behind the scenes of Mandalorian and so on and so forth, I think because otherwise you can't curve. So it's too tight. So you have to be careful of moire. And if you actually look at some of the behind the scenes in Mandalorian, you'll see the moire. Like it was, they had to. It does limit what they can shoot at times. Nick, thank you so much. Thanks to the entire class there and the studio and Drexel and
4. Switch to camera 4 so we can see the whole room. Come out, Captain Chelsea.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Hey, thanks everybody.
Here we are.
Such a great experience. This is the dream is to be able to jump into a studio and talk about something in detail when you're coming in from there. And so it's really, really great to have. I just want to thank Nick and all the students in Drexel University for making this available. Really, really great second hour. So thanks, Nick.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks everybody there, and we thanks to the of course thanks to the panelists. Can't do this without you. A great first hour, and then we jumped into the second hour. Great conversation here. Thanks to the producers who are of course asking all the questions and keeping our show going, and thanks to the incredible back end team who has to figure out how to make all this stuff work as we start. And we're going to bring a studio in. So thanks to the incredible back end team that's putting all this stuff together. We traveled 50,000 miles, 81,000 kilometers, 403 million bananas for scale today. So it's good.
That's a lot of bananas.
A lot of bananas. So much potassium. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. I'm going to jump into They're still on. I gotta go get a coffee now.
I liked it. We may be working from some of those students someday.
You can leave the Zoom.